Close your eyes and imagine this. In 1969, somewhere in Northern California, a killer is sitting at a table. He just got home. His hands are steady. He picks up a pen and he starts writing a confession letter. Not to a friend or family, but to the police and to every newspaper in the Bay Area. He's not confessing out of guilt. He's bragging. He wants them to know what he did, and he wants them to try to catch him. He also wants them to fail. And that's exactly what happened. In over 50 years of investigation, with thousands of suspects, the full force of the FBI, and technology that didn't even exist when these crimes took place, nobody has ever been charged. Nobody has ever been arrested. And nobody knows who he really was. His name, or the name he gave himself, was the Zodiac. And tonight we're going to go through everything. The crimes, the ciphers, the mind games, and the question that still has no answer. Who was he? The first confirmed Zodiac attack happened on a cold December night in 1968. On a quiet stretch of road near Berryessa, California, two teenagers had parked their car there. His name was David Faraday. He was 17, and her name was Betty Lou. She was 16. They had just been out on a date. Sometime around 11 o'clock, a second car pulled up alongside them. We don't know exactly what happened in those first moments, but we do know David was shot once in the head, right next to the car. Betty Lou tried to run. She was shot 5 times in the back. She never made it more than 30 feet from the car. A passing driver found them. David was still breathing when the police arrived, but he later died on the way to the hospital. The police had almost nothing to go on. No witnesses, no motive, no connection between the killer and the victims. 2 teenagers killed for no reason anyone could find. At the time, nobody called it a work of a serial killer. It just looked like a random, horrific attack. But 6 months later, the same man came back. It was the early hours of July 5th, just after midnight. A young couple was parked at the Blue Rock Springs Park, only about 4 miles from where David and Betty Lou had been killed. Their names were Darlene Farron, 22, and Mike Mageau, 19. They were sitting at Darlene's car when a vehicle pulled up next to them, then left, then came back. A man got out. He walked towards the car with a flashlight in one hand and the gun in the other. He pointed the light directly at their faces, then without a word, he shot them both. Darlene was killed. Mike was shot multiple times, once in the neck, once in the jaw, and in the leg. He survived, but just barely. As the killer walked back to his car, Mike let out a cry of pain, and the killer turned around, walked back, and shot them both again. Then he left. About an hour later, a man called the local police station. He spoke calmly. He said he wanted to report a double murder. He gave them the location, and then, before hanging up, he said, "I also killed those kids last year." He was referring to David and Betty Lou. This was the first time the police realized these attacks were connected. The same person had done both. But they still didn't know who they were looking for. Then the letters arrived. In the 1st of August, 3 newspapers received an unmarked letter: the San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Vallejo Times Herald. Each letter was almost identical. The writer said he was the one who committed the murders. He gave details that had never been made public. What Darlene was wearing, the exact ammunition used, the number of shots fired, things only the killer could have known. Each letter also came with 1/3 of a coded message. Cipher, made of strange symbols, letters, and shapes. The killer said that if the newspapers put his letters up in the front pages, he would stop killing. If they didn't, he promised to go on a killing spree all weekend. He also said that the cipher, when solved, would reveal who he was. The newspapers printed the letters. A few days later, another letter arrived. This time, addressed simply, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." That was the moment he gave himself a name. The name that would haunt California for decades. The first cipher, 480 symbols long, was cracked within a week. Not by police, not the FBI or the CIA, but by a schoolteacher and his wife. Donald and Betty Hardin, sitting at their kitchen table, figured out that a killer this arrogant would probably use the word kill somewhere near the beginning. They were right. The decoded message started with these words: "I like killing people because it's so much fun." It went on to say that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife, that every person he killed would be his slave in the next world, and that he was not afraid of the gas chamber, because death would only send him to paradise sooner. It never said his name. By now, the Bay Area was terrified, and the Zodiac was just getting started. 2 months after the letters, he struck again. This time at Lake Berryessa, a popular spot for picnics and hiking in Napa County. A young couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were relaxing by the water in the afternoon when the stranger approached them. This time, the Zodiac looked different. He was wearing a hood, a black executioner's hood, handmade, with a bib in the front. Stitched into the bib was his symbol, a circle with a cross through it. He looked, by all accounts, completely bizarre. He told them he was an escaped convict who needed their car and some money to get to Mexico. He spoke calmly, almost politely, and he asked Brian to tie up Cecilia. Then he tied up Brian himself, and then he pulled out a knife. He stabbed Cecilia 14 times. He stabbed Brian 8 times. Then he walked back to Brian's car, and on the door, he wrote the dates of his previous attacks, and the date of this one, in pen. He listed them like a scoreboard. Then he drove away. Brian survived. Cecilia died in hospital 2 days later. About 1 hour after the attack, the Zodiac called the Napa County Sheriff's Department from a payphone just blocks away from the sheriff's office. He told them he wanted to report a double murder. He didn't hang up. A radio reporter found the phone off the hook moments later. Detectives found a palm print on that phone, but they were never able to match it to anyone. The last confirmed Zodiac murder happened just 2 weeks later, in the city of San Francisco itself. Paul Stein was 29 years old, and he was studying for his doctorate at San Francisco State University. That night, he was working as a cab driver, when just before 10 o'clock, he picked up a passenger in Union Square who asked to be taken to Presidio Heights. When the cab reached the destination, the passenger asked him to drive 1 more block. Then he shot Paul Stein once in the head at point-blank range. 3 teenagers in a nearby house saw it happen. They watched the killer lean into the front seat, wipe down the interior of the cab with a piece of cloth, then tear off a section of the driver's shirt. Then he walked into the darkness of Presidio Park. The teenagers called the police. When officers were dispatched, there was a miscommunication. They were told to look for a black man. The Zodiac was white. 2 officers actually stopped and spoke to a man matching his description walking through the Presidio that night. He told them he had seen a man running nearby. They let him go, and he kept walking. That man may have been the Zodiac himself. Days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter. Inside was a small piece of Paul Stine's blood-stained shirt. The Zodiac wanted them to know it was him. This is where the case becomes something truly unlike anything in history of American crime. Most serial killers try to disappear. They avoid attention. They hide. The Zodiac did the exact opposite. Over the next several years, he sent more than 20 letters to newspapers and police. Some were threatening, some were taunting, some were almost playful. He gave himself a body count, like a scoreboard, updating it with each letter. He claimed at various points that he had killed 13 people, then 17, then 37. Only 5 murders were ever confirmed, though. In one letter, he threatened to shoot out the tire of a school bus. And I'm going to quote here, "Pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." Schools in the area went on high alert. Police were assigned to ride school buses. Bus drivers were given description cards with the killer's composite sketch. He never attacked a school bus, but the threat alone was enough to send the entire Bay Area into a wave of panic. He also sent a cipher, 7 pages long, that he claimed contained his bomb-making instructions and the map showing where he buried the explosives. That cipher, known as Z32, never been fully decoded. No bomb was ever found. In November 1969, a man called into a live TV show, a morning chat program, and he claimed to be the Zodiac. When the next letter arrived, the real Zodiac was furious. He denied being that caller. He wrote, and this is the decoded version of his second cipher, cracked 50 years later in 2020. "I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show." He then said that he was not afraid of death, because death meant paradise and more slaves. He also sent a Halloween card to a journalist who had been covering his case, Paul Avery of the Chronicle. The card read, "Peekaboo, you are doomed." Avery refused police protection. His colleagues started wearing badges that said, "I am not Avery." At one point, the Zodiac complained in a letter that nobody was wearing Zodiac-themed buttons. He wanted people wearing buttons with his symbol, like he was a band selling merchandise. He was playing a game, and the entire state of California was being forced to play along. The letters continued until 1974, and then, without any explanation, they stopped. Most serial killers have a pattern. They have a type of victim. They operate in a small area. They have a ritual they repeat. The Zodiac broke all of those rules. His victims had no connection to each other. Young couples, a cab driver, no common thread. He attacked in different counties, which meant different police jurisdictions, making it harder for investigators to share information and connect the dots. His methods changed every time. A gun at one scene, a knife at another, a hood and a rope at another. He left different kinds of evidence at different scenes. At one location, police lifted shell casings. At another, footprints from a military boot. In the cab, a bloody palm print. At the payphone, a partial print. None of it matched. None of it pointed in the same direction. The DNA that was eventually collected from the envelopes of his letters was never matched to any suspect. More than 2,500 people were investigated over decades. The most prominent suspect was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, a schoolteacher from Vallejo. He had a strange obsession with the name Zodiac. He owned the same type of watch as one found at a crime scene. Witnesses described someone who looked like him. He had no alibi for some of the attacks, but his DNA didn't match. His fingerprints didn't match. His handwriting didn't match. He died in 1992, never charged. In 2021, a group of amateur investigators announced they had identified the killer as a man named Gary Francis Post, a house painter who had died in 2018. They claimed his forehead scars matched witness descriptions and that his name was encoded in the ciphers. The FBI looked into it. They didn't confirm it, and the investigation remained open. And the two remaining ciphers, the Z13 and Z32, have never been decoded, 13 symbols and 32 symbols respectively. So short that it's almost impossible to know if any proposed solution is correct. It's almost like the Zodiac designed his crimes to be unsolvable. He was intelligent enough to vary everything that mattered, and arrogant enough to leave just enough behind to keep the world watching. So what do we actually know about who this person was? We know he was comfortable with firearms, and likely had some kind of military or outdoors background. The way he taped a flashlight to his gun at Lake Herman Road showed familiarity with weapons. The ammunition he used was also specialized. We know he was well read. His first cipher referred a short story called The Most Dangerous Game, about a man who hunts human beings for sport. He saw himself in that story. We know he had an obsession with control. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to be seen killing. He wanted credit. He wanted fear. He needed people to know he existed. Some psychologists have described him as one of the first media age killers, someone who understood the power of headlines before social media was even a concept. We know he was organized enough to plan his attacks across multiple counties, and careful enough to avoid leaving anything definitive behind. And we know he could simply walk away, because after 1974, he was never heard from again. Why did he stop? Nobody knows. He might have died. He might have been imprisoned for something else. He might have grown old and lost his drive. Or he might just have decided he's had enough attention. He stopped at his own terms, exactly the way he started. Here's something worth thinking about. The Zodiac operated in a world without CCTV cameras, without mobile phones, without internet, without DNA databases, without the kind of forensic technology that can now pull a usable profile from a decades-old envelope seal. He crossed between different police jurisdictions at a time when those departments barely communicated with each other. He sent letters through the post in an era when there was no automated system to scan handwriting, track ink composition, or analyze paper fiber. Today, the payphone call to the sheriff's department would have been traced in minutes. The cab would have had a dash cam. The letters would have been processed in a national forensics lab within days. Every street in Presidio Heights has cameras. The teenagers who witnessed Paul Stein's murder would have had mobile phones and could have filmed it in real time. His ciphers, which stumped FBI and CIA for decades, were eventually broken by 3 civilians using software and collaborative online communities. Today, that would take days, not 50 years. Would the Zodiac have been caught if he were active now? Almost certainly yes. which is both reassuring and unsettling. Reassuring because the tools we now have are powerful. Unsettling because it means the only reason he got away with it is that he was born exactly in the right time, in a window of history where the world simply wasn't equipped to stop him. He knew it, and he was counting on it. And he was right. The case of the Zodiac Killer remains officially open with the San Francisco Police Department. His letters are still held in evidence. His ciphers are still being studied. And somewhere, if he's still alive, he is an old man, watching, perhaps, as the world keeps trying to find him. He told us he wasn't afraid, and he might have been telling the truth. Thanks for listening. Good night.